Hello, I'm ABX2Cat and welcome back to another second channel video. Today I have a vlog for you all. I'm going to be talking about one of the three things I don't usually talk about on my channel, which if you don't know are religion, politics, and a third thing I always forget. But yeah, I'm going to be talking about one of those two things because it is a really big issue. That is going to be a big world event this year, and if you don't know, that is the EU referendum on whether or not they should stay a member of the EU. So UK are voting whether they should stay in the EU or leave the EU. This has its own term, Brexit, and it's going to be a really big deal regardless of where you are. If you're in the UK, it's extra big deal. If you're in the EU in general, it's a really big deal. If you're outside the world, it still has a lot of effects on you. So I want to talk about a few important things here. The reason this one comes up and not any other big political topic is because this is an issue where I feel like the vast majority of people have no real idea what the ramifications of yes or no are. And I'm not saying that to be condescending. I'm saying that as in, like, I've spent hours and hours and hours researching this, and it's still not entirely clear what happens in the case of either. So I'm going to be talking about, first of all, how that even happens, how we're having a vote on something not many people, maybe even the big people understand. And second of all, I wanted to talk about why the UK has this very bizarre relationship with the EU, because I think most countries just agree it's a good thing and they're like, yeah, let's do more, whereas the UK is just sitting on the sideline like, oh, this is, we hate it here, and I want to talk about why that is. So, as with every, big thing like this, it can easily be kind of traced by going back in time a bit, and, the back in time in this case is to the start of the EU, which wasn't even called the EU back in its conception, because it was in the 50s, basically Europe had torn itself apart again with World War II, and they decided, maybe we should not do that. I feel like European wars are a bad thing. So, six countries, six of the biggest European countries, Italy, France, Germany, and a few small ones, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, all got together and decided, yeah, let's talk a bit more about this. And also, they founded a steel community. So it was originally just the European steel community, and they, did stuff with steel prices together, and that's what it was for a while. It was a relatively limited scope project between just 6 countries, and everything was fine and dandy. So obviously, as a result of this, they slowly expanded more and more, and in the 70s/80s, they started growing into just the European community, and yeah, this was a big deal because free trade, basically they opened up all trade between the 6 countries, and this is a big deal. Free trade is generally agreed by most, people ever, that is to be a good thing, because it means not only can your businesses sell products all the way across these other countries, but you can buy any of those products without any tariffs or any mess like that. So yeah, free trade's a good thing. Everyone wanted in on this, and lots of countries wanted to join the European community. One of those countries was, kind of half of the UK. It was even divided from back then, because the left didn't want to join, the right kind of did, and the right got in power, so they, tried to join, and they actually were turned down for their first membership. France actually vetoed us, because something still of our relationship with the US, but then later on, after France had a different leader, we then got into the European community, and we could trade goods with all these people, and that was a good thing, right? Like, trading goods, yeah, it's great. And actually, just after that, we had a referendum on whether we wanted to stay. So we had a big referendum to decide, are we going to stay in this block of things we're not too sure we like, because, there's lots of benefits, or should we leave? And back then, the question was just like, should we stay in the European community, or should we leave? It was actually, I think this was the first UK-wide referendum ever, and basically the result was just, yeah, let's stay. So you might think, okay, issue settled. You like free trade, the country decided, 2/3 want to stay in. What's the big deal, Toy Cat? Why is everyone then decided, we're going to go crazy and have referendum? So basically, the reason this got weird is because slowly over the next 2 or 3 decades, because, that's from the 70s, Europe got more and more integrated. There's a bunch of different treaties, you can look them all up, I can't even say the name of the places, there's the Maastricht Treaty, and basically one of these treaties in particular made a few really big deals. One was a European, flag and European identity, so basically, and also the European passport kind of thing. It's not a true thing yet, but there's basically, if you're a citizen of any EU country, you are an EU citizen as well as a citizen of your country. So as a UK citizen, I'm also an EU citizen. Why is this a big deal? It's a big deal because it means that I can now legally go and live, as long as I have a job, in any other country in this block. So because I'm self-employed, I can just go live in Sweden if I want to. I can go live in Hungary. I can go live in Italy. You get the point. I can go live in any other country, and the same is true in reverse. So this is a great thing for most countries, because a lot of countries at the time were roughly equal standing, but this has gone a lot worse for the UK in particular, because a lot of the countries the EU has expanded to are ones that, ex-Soviet, ex-communism countries, which have a lot lower GDP per person. So for these countries, Poland's the big stereotypical one, but stuff like Hungary and Bulgaria and Romania, all these other countries have this massive opportunity, like all their citizens can officially come and live in the UK, and as a result, a lot of people do, and it means we've had a population growth of like 0.5% every year, which is a big amount to grow for immigration. So yeah, immigration has been a big factor in the UK. It's always a hot topic political issue, and that's one of the things. But you've also got to bear in mind, that was just one of the things they started doing in the 90s. They also had the common European identity. UK people are very patriotic of what we've got, and they're like, wait a minute, so the EU flag's eventually gonna just replace ours, and it's not really like that, but it kind of is. There's the EU flag, and there's also the other one, which is ever closer union. All countries had to sign off on this principle that we are all agreeing to get closer and closer and closer over time. So you can see this every single year. There are new things to bring each EU country closer and closer together. There's a lot of really cool developments come up this, and there's a lot of weird things. So for instance, one of the cool things that you might notice if you're a consumer is the fact that roaming charges are just gone between EU countries. Another thing you might notice is there's a euro currency between the countries. So fortunately, us as a country decided to opt out of the euro. We actually got that somehow in a treaty, but no other country can. Like, if you join the EU, you have to now join the euro. And again, that's a point of contention for us, because now Europe is kind of, because, they don't really want people to opt out, but because there's so many different sections of Europe, there's the Eurozone, which is countries in Europe, the UK isn't a part of a lot of this, and as a result, we pay into a lot of stuff that we don't get a say on. And again, for a lot of people, this is a mess, and we don't want any of this stuff, and we have a strong currency. And just the point being here is, that lots of things happened in Europe that lots of people in this country didn't particularly like. However, because, again, the left-right divide in the UK meant that the left was mostly for Europe, and the right was kind of against Europe, but not entirely, it meant that the right, who were in power at the time, fractured, and they stayed out of power for a very long time. So the question was just kind of answered by, do we like this? Not too much, but, it's better than the alternative, leaving. And yeah, so all of this stuff has been piling on, and now as the right finally gets back in power, they got back in power through having a leader that's just like, let's just not deal with this. However, if you followed this whole thing in the last 5 years, you might notice that the anti-immigration, anti-Europe party, UKIP, have gotten bigger and bigger. And even in 2014, I believe they won a countrywide they won the European elections. So the European Parliament has elections every 5 years, and they had the most seats, which means that the vast majority of people who voted, which it was a terrible turnout, actually voted for this anti-EU party. Which is funny that you're electing people to the EU who don't like it. I don't know what that is, but yeah. So basically, UKIP and basically just anti-EU parties in general were a big thing, and at the 2015 election, the right agreed, perhaps, not knowing what would happen, that if they got a majority, which they weren't expecting, referendum by 2017, and by the tiniest margins, by the craziest of, weird opinion, basically it wasn't expected by anyone. What happened is they won a majority. I don't think even they were expecting it, and as a result of this, they have to hold a referendum by 2017. It's in their manifesto, and I don't know, it's not obviously legal, but obviously the Prime Minister will lose face if he does it. So he's like, okay, well, now we have to have a referendum by then. Let's go work this out. And you might think, okay, this gets pretty simple then. We're going to fix the EU. We're going to sign out, we're going to opt out of the stuff that we don't like, like everyone's complaining about immigration. Let's just sign it. Let's just, opt out of that part. Let's just not do all the stuff. However, Europe, on the other hand, this is a really long story. And again, this is the condensed version of all the hours. But Europe, on the other hand, do not want to set the precedent that you can just opt out things you do not like. There is so much weird stuff that goes on with, opt-outs, and they basically don't want to encourage this, and, because if the UK suddenly gets out of all this stuff we don't like, it sends the message to Hungary, Poland, blah, 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 that they can just opt out of stuff they don't like. They don't want to join the Euro? That's fine, you don't have to. That's not the message they want to send, so they've been really, really kind of strict on what they can be allowing. So as a result, what our reform version of Europe is kind of the same as what we've got already. So now, with that all announced, it happened earlier today actually, there is going to be a referendum in June of this year, and it's a really tricky thing because, like I said, there's a lot of things about Europe that are generally agreed as terrible, but there's a lot of things in Europe that are generally agreed as really, really good. And unfortunately, there is no way to properly have all that the other. The people who want to leave say, yeah, well, what you do is you leave and then you opt into the stuff you want again, which is a super risky play because, one, no one has ever left the EU before. In fact, there's not even any treaty that covers leaving the EU, I guess you just stop following the existing ones. So leaving the EU is actually a really tricky thing to do, and you have no idea how other countries are going to react. And bear in mind that if other countries do start trading with again, which is the prediction, then they're sending the message to other countries, you can leave and get that. So basically, as a result of this, we have no idea what's going to happen if we leave the EU. and we have no idea what happens truly if we stay. Like, are we, all the things, are we truly going to be able to opt out of stuff, or are we locked in forever? Because there was a few conditions of, like, we can't have a referendum for another X number of years, and it means there's this really tricky situation that, again, the UK have to make, where it's like, basically it comes down to, there is lots of things that, EU is a big bundle of stuff. Do you want it all? Do you want the the European Parliament overriding our own? Do you want this, or do you want none of that? And most people are not on either side. No one likes everything that EU does. No one likes nothing that EU does. And as a result, the UK has got a situation where no one knows what's happening. And instead, it's all going to be down to like how the campaigns go. And that's what I think is really, really messed up here. So the key point here is, if you live in the UK and you're voting on this, which actually I'm not sure what percentage of my viewers are in the UK and above the age of 18, I don't know what to say. I'd say just don't buy into the random campaigns where they're like, "Oh, if you leave, your country will shrink by this much," and don't buy into the campaigns that say, "Oh, well, if we stay, then there'll be 10 billion migrants here," because I don't think either is entirely true. The final point, actually, I wanted to raise here, and this is just me like not liking politics in general, but the thing that makes this really messed up is that our government officially is going to be campaigning to stay in, and there's going to be a few other parties campaigning to go out. But the really weird thing is that the European Union itself, which has a lot of money, like a crazy amount, is able to campaign on their behalf to stay in. And not only this, but there is precedence of referendums on each of these treaties, because obviously these big treaties weren't always just ratified, but in some cases what actually happened is they lost the referendum. So in Ireland, they voted on whether they wanted to do this whole thing, they lost, and then the EU had a second vote where they just poured in more money, and then they won. And that's where this gets really scary. Like, it's a referendum no one understands that we don't really get to control anyway. So that's Brexit and Whatnot Explained. Like I said, it's a really complex issue of lots of things. That's the summary of like hours and hours of reading. And I think the key point here is I don't know if I should do politics again, because I hate how the ending here, it's not like a happy message of like, oh yeah, this is what you need to do, go vote in or whatever. It's yeah, it's a messed up situation that we don't have control over. But I just want to be cool to share that with you. Let me know what you thought of the almost political but try and stay out of it thing right there. Just to give my full disclaimer, I am neutral on this whole thing. Like, I generally haven't decided which side I actually care about yet, but I do want to visit all the 28 countries in the EU this year, so I guess I've got a slight interest on staying in, because it makes it slightly easier to go to them. But yeah, let me know what you think, comments down below, and I'm gonna have some more video games here soon, probably. So goodbye.